1,000 of it is for that officer, group of officers that are.
There should be an offsetting revenue then for that?
That's the 75,000.
Okay.
Actually, the budget really didn't increase by 101,000.
So the revenue
more
is
like
25,000.
25,000.
Yeah.
So where's that revenue coming from?
over there.
We're on page 29, correct?
School. School's paying for the security.
We're on page 29?
That's what I'm asking.
Are we
Let's
on
see.
29?
29. Okay, Chief?
Chief,
I don't know
Chief
what
Rowley.
page you're on. I just have my excerpt of my.
Okay, it says Police Department 3120. Is that on your?
Yeah. Do you want to do dispatch or the police department first?
Why don't we do the Police Department
Since
first?
we're on page
Okay. Well, you just want me to go through the changes? Is that what you'd like from me? Or?
Pretty much, as far as line 100, that is contractual raises.
Correct.
Basically.
Yeah, we went through and figured
Well,
out
don't fix it, it's freezing
pretty much
over here.
exactly what we anticipated costing us, taking into account the pay raise in June, step increases, longevity increases, and so forth, and the new. We had several senior officers leave and new officers hired, so there's a pay difference there. So we went through and figured it out, and we feel that that's a very accurate number.
Okay.
Overtime, personal service, Fred and I talked about that, and we reduced that based on historical data that we weren't, utilizing the full 50,000. And a lot of that is attributed to a great portion of the overtime that my officers work. They take in comp time, which saves us money. When they use their comp time, that they will. They take a disproportionate amount of comp time versus pay, which is fine with me in the city.
What is comp time?
They lieu time. They can take time off in lieu of working overtime, and they take a great deal of that in compensatory time, so they don't. They can take an hour off here and go home earlier, come in late, or take a day off.
And that doesn't screw your schedule all up?
No, we schedule accordingly. I mean, you don't get to leave if there's not enough people working. We don't allow people to use comp time that creates overtime. So in essence, it saves us money.
How many new bodies did you say you had or will have?
Over, the last year, we've probably hired 4.
So we
And we have an
all full
opening
now?
right now.
We have one opening left?
Correct.
Okay.
When you have, I mean, that's kind of high, right? Isn't that normally?
Very unusual. Very unusual.
Would that result in more overtime being consumed by your veterans who are training or?
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like
No, the older guys are less likely to work.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody who's been around a long time, is working days and weekends off, doesn't want to come in and work a midnight shift.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's 4 steps to our pay, so it actually, I think a new officer versus a full-time officer that's been here a while, ballpark is probably $50,000 or $60,000 difference in pay.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Personal services 102, we just reduced that ever so slightly, I think by $1,000 or roughly thereabouts. Let's see. The parking we increased slightly over last year. This summer we would like to put on an additional part-time parking officer for just the summer months to increase our enforcement.
Is there parking enforcement during the winter months?
Yeah, we have a parking enforcement officer that works year-round.
Okay.
4 to 5 hours a day.
Okay.
He recently has been off for the past 3 months probably. He had hip replacement surgery.
Oh, because I haven't seen him out and about, so I wondered why.
No, he's been off for that, and he did a good job. And we searched to try to find somebody temporarily to work in place of him, and it was very difficult.
Okay.
So we've just been supplementing with some of the officers. So we haven't been writing as many citations as we would normally. He came and saw me recently, and he's coming back to work shortly.
Okay.
But during the summer months, when volume is high, and that's when we should be ticketing more, this will enable us a little bit to add a couple hours a day throughout the nice weather.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you see, if we go ahead and do the 2 kiosks in Lot 6, do you see that helping reducing some of those hours? Or not?
Not necessarily. What it would do is make it more effective, because it wouldn't take him as long to ticket that lot.
Okay.
So then the faster he gets around town and the more areas he gets to, the better the enforcement. if he has enough time, I encourage him to go out into the numbered streets, and expand his area to write everything from handicap parking to fire hydrant blocking to whatever. He's just not restrained by the immediate downtown, but the quicker he can get from point A to point B, and the easier it is to write the tickets, like with those kiosks, he'll know when he goes into that lot a lot faster which cars are in violation and which ones need to be written versus having to walk to each and every car. You just go
Okay.
to the kiosk and it will tell you, which cars are in violation, so that'll make it more effective.
Good. Okay.
The kiosk presentation, that'll be presented by Lens, because that's
Mhm.
off-street parking.
Thanks.
Personal services court went up a little bit. We've talked to the state, and we have plans on anticipating an increase in their wages. Over the next several years, we're gonna try to increase them a little bit, and that's all reimbursed through the state.
Yes, there's a revenue line that
Yeah.
offsets that,
Yep.
very amount.
Let's see, that's the same crossing guards. The matrons went up a little bit, strictly due to her years of service. She got a contractual bump in her salary. The special patrol officer, as Fred alluded to, that's a new item, $75,000, which is paid for by the school. And as he already stated, there's a line item that's created in revenue to offset that. So that's a wash. Under 250, you're going to see an increase there. The main difference from the previous year is this year I'm looking to get a new license plate reader for the car. Those are very expensive. The one we have is starting to cause us problems. They're extremely expensive to get repaired. We do have trade-in value on the one we have, and I'm looking to replace the one we have, and that's what that's for.
Chief, could I just ask you a quick question? So, in something like that, because I did see that you were looking to pick something like that up, would it make sense to treat that as a one-time expense and not necessarily put it into a budgeted line item, but treat it as maybe like a capital purchase? And the only reason I say that is because once you put something into a budget, and then next year we're sitting here and that line is at 15,000, and then it stays at 15,000. Maybe that expense doesn't come back out of there. Would it be fair to say to treat that as like a separate item? Okay, you need this, and we just plan for that capital purchase as a one-time thing rather than build it into an operating budget?
Well, to be honest, John, I mean, obviously you know a lot more about that stuff than I do. That line item would be reduced next year by the amount of that device. The one we have currently, I think, is about 5 years old, which is about, it's usual life expectancy on those types of things, so I wouldn't be asking for that amount of money
Right.
for that device again.
Right.
To me, you and Fred are trained in these kind of things.
Right.
I don't know what difference it would make. Makes no difference to me,
Right.
how you want to fund that
Okay.
device. I don't really have a opinion on it, to be honest with you.
So typically, if there was, if it was a leased fee, if there was a reoccurring leased fee, then we would want to put that into a budget. But for a one-time purchase, Fred, wouldn't we want to just
Well, for
fund that differently?
For $5,000, I didn't, if it were $50,000 or 25, I didn't know that you'd want to throw that into capital items. But I can.
But to John's point, right, so when you build it into a budget, it's there forever, and you can say like, well, we'll reduce it next year. I'm not saying you wouldn't, right? I'm not saying, well, but that's how things like this kind of,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
and we lose track of things like that.
What did we buy last year that was 23,000? Was that
I
a
get what
one-time
you're saying,
purchase?
because historically,
Yeah,
those
I'm
things
not being
go
very
down,
articulate,
right?
but
They just stay there,
Yeah.
year after year.
We look at that number from last year.
or if anything, it becomes a false savings.
Don't
Like,
know.
see, I
I'd
cut
have to look
$5,000,
at that
$6,000
and
off
get
this
back
line.
It may have been several smaller things. Typically, for my budget, for year to year, it's usually just like equipment type things. I mean, everything else is pretty stagnant. But we have a lot of electronic equipment that we use, and usually that's what it is, whether it's a car computer that went bad or different things, but that's really the only fluctuations normally from year to year you'll see in my budget. Like this particular item, you won't see that again for 5 years, next year, maybe some other piece of equipment that needs to be replaced. But, you know, there's not a lot of changes in my stuff, but usually it is equipment.
Could that be the same for the body worn camera as well, Jeff, or is that in as well?
Well, that's a whole different animal, which I'll be happy to go into with in just a few minutes if you want. We'll revisit that, Brian. That's a little bit of a different story with that. But typically, like, you know, we have, and some of it I've gotten grants for. You know, we video record custodial interrogations now. That was some equipment, but I got a grant for that and different things. So, any more questions on that particular line item? So, Johnny, I don't, however you guys decide you want to fund it, that's fine with me.
I could put in a new general ledger account called
Well, what-
one-time purchase.
No,
or
I mean,
something.
why would we not consider that the way we do for contingency when we have one-off purchases and we use contingency funding for those one-off purchases?
And then it's just
Good.
not showing up
We
in the
can.
budget.
I mean-
I'd rather handle it that way, honestly.
Okay. You want, so
I'm
you-
one person.
you would like to see that 15,194 reduced? Is that?
Yeah, by the cost of the new license plate reader, and we'll treat that new
With that-
license plate
with
reader
that
as
I'm
being
sorry to
said-
interrupt you with that logic. Would you do the same like with the kiosks and all these other equipment type purchases?
equipment type purchases should either be through a capital fund or we could treat through the
'Cause those are
contingency
one-time
fund.
purchases.
One-time
You won't make
purchases,
that again,
correct.
You know, for years.
Right.
How much should I reduce it by?
Let me get back with you on the exact
Okay.
figure on that if I could, before I get off track.